Rudy Gobert is without question one of the most polarizing players in modern NBA history. On one side, you got the data science crowd flooding the conversation with every advanced metric imaginable, sometimes to a point where you're like, what are you even talking about anymore? And on the other side, there's a completely different group of fans who aren't even sure he could string together 2 crossovers between his legs.
Rudy Gobert would dominate him.
Come on, man. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying.
Rudy Gobert dominate you.
Chuck, say one thing, I'm gonna punch you right in your face. I'm telling you right now.
But the truth is, no matter how painfully unaesthetic his game can look, and no matter how demoralizing it feels when he somehow banks in one of those prayer mid-range jumpers, I actually lean towards the side that believes Rudy Gobert is an extremely valuable asset. And if you want a clear and obvious example of his impact, I found a perfect one while watching a recent Suns vs Timberwolves game, as it showed exactly how dominant Rudy can be even if it doesn't show off the stat sheet or pass the eye test at first glance. But first, let me feed you guys some context, alright? So as I'm watching this game, shout out NBC by the way for doing wonders for the viewer's experience. I mean, thank God we got some real, positive commentary again. But that's not the point and is probably a hot take anyways. But during the broadcast, they ran a segment where we got to hear directly from Timberwolves assistant coach Mike Nori. And in that clip, he's basically spilling the beans on what the Wolves are trying to do defensively and what their entire schematic goal really is. And unless you're a professional lip reader, which I'm guessing if you're watching this channel, you probably aren't, here's a simple version of what he's saying. So he's using this wide action as a microcosm of their entire defense. And instead of going under screens and giving them clean wide open threes, the Wolves want to play hyper-aggressive perimeter defense and fight over the top with the goal of funneling everything inside the arc, where Rudy Gobert's waiting to clean things up, whether that means contesting, or protecting the rim, or covering for anyone who gets beat, which makes complete sense when you look at the type of defensive monsters this team has. I mean, imagine what it's like on the other side of that matchup. You got these defensive bloodhounds like Anthony Edwards and Jay McDaniels picking you up full court, and they can guard you with zero fear, because they know if they do get beat, they've arguably the best defensive anchor sitting behind them, ready to erase any mistakes his teammates make. And this all showed up in the numbers even before they had the Suns game. The Wolves were already one of the hottest teams in the league, riding a 5-game win streak, and when you look at their 4-man lineup of Edwards, Gobert, McDaniels, and Randle, they ranked with the 3rd best offensive rating, 2nd best defensive rating, and a ridiculous plus 14.7 net rating, which would only rank below this year's OKC Thunder team in history, who I'm starting to actually worry might be one of the best teams we've ever seen. Looking at some of the tape over this Wolves 5-game heater, there's no surprise how often you'll see them execute their defensive game plan to perfection. You got relentless perimeter defenders constantly forcing ball handlers inside, right into the Rudy Gobert trap. And in today's NBA, where controlling the 3-point line is everything, that's exactly why the Wolves have been so dominant on defense over this run, just like they diagrammed in that earlier example. Watch how Edwards takes the exact same route as Murphy as he fights over the top to take away the 3-pointer, then as soon as he drives by and goes inside the arc, that's where Gobert can then sandwich the driver, which then leaves Murphy no choice but to swing it, and somehow Gobert still recovers in time to protect the paint effectively. Then you have this example, and look how high the Wolves are guarding Harden. Even when they could easily just go under the screen, Reed sticks to the game plan and fights over the top because he knows Gobert's waiting to meet Harden at the rim. And Harden doesn't even look at the basket once he sees Rudy standing there, and the Wolves get a stop again. There are also a lot of times where you'll see Minnesota just straight up break defensive principles, knowing you can do that with Gobert roaming out there, as Clark gets hyper aggressive and goes over the double drag, but Dillingham leaves his assignment and gambles for the steal here, and normally that's how you give up open shots. But they can afford it because Gobert just erases any mistake coming his direction. Here, for example, they can cheat certain actions, as Dante beats his man to prevent him from using the screen, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is seriously the luxury of having Rudy Gobert on the defensive end. That safety net is exactly what makes the Wolves' defense so threatening. And the last thing I want you to notice is pay attention to these closeouts, because watch McDaniels here as he shades his man towards the baseline on purpose towards Gobert. That's by design because he wants to filter baseline where the offense gets stuck and falls for the trap again.
And the 2018 Kia NBA Defensive Player of the Year award goes to
Rudy Gobert, Utah Jazz.
But enough about the defense, because we already know what Rudy can do on that side of the ball. I mean, you don't just win 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards by accident. But like I mentioned earlier, the Wolves have also had an elite offense on display during this run. And you might pull up the box score and see Gobert averaging a measly 11 points per game, but once again the stat sheet completely undersells his impact. Because check out some of these plays, and you start to understand what he really brings to the table. Rudy Gobert isn't the type of player you can just dump the ball to and say, hey, go get me a bucket. But what he does bring to the offense, which is arguably even more impactful, is the way he creates opportunities for everyone else as a screener. Right now he ranks 4th in the entire NBA in screen assists, and while it might sound like a fake stat at first, when you actually turn on the tape, there are possessions where he just straight up removes defenders from the play. And I mean that literally. The reason the Wolves have such an efficient offense is because the shot quality Gobert helps create is almost impossible for teams to replicate. On this play, for example, he sets that initial screen to create that first bit of separation, then immediately rolls to the basket and screens a second defender on the way down, which results in an open lane and a wide open floater. And he also has a super wide frame that's very helpful, because even when defenders try to fight over the screen, the path they end up taking is way too long, and by the time they recover, the play is already over, and they're completely left in the dust. Then pay attention to how hard Gobert sets these, because many times we'll screen people and force an automatic switch, so when this happens, that's where Gobert can really assert his size, crashing the offensive glass for easy putbacks or slipping behind the defense for lobs at the rim. So overall, Gobert's offensive impact is never going to show up through points per game or his bag, because let's be real, he doesn't really have one. But what does show up is how completely out of sync the Wolves look when he's not on the floor, making all these types of plays without needing the ball in his hands. And that's exactly what we saw transpire the other night, when their winning streak came to an end against a Suns team that was missing both Devin Booker and Jalen Green.
And a welcome to a wintry but electric Target Center on a Monday night in Minneapolis. It is the 6th and 7th seeds in the Western Conference going head-to-head. The 15-8 Minnesota Timberwolves, the 13-10 Phoenix Suns. And
now early in this game, we saw the Rudy Gobert impact on full display with the same things we've already talked about. Starting on the offensive end, he was physically removing defenders from the picture and freeing up his teammates for wide open looks, just target practice for the Wolves at this point. And when he wasn't setting crushing screens, he was still making plays around the basket by either dominating the offensive glass or doing all the dirty work. This play right here is the perfect example. He's not the most gracious athlete in the world, but he hustles, saves the ball from going out of bounds, and then Edwards comes in to go finish the highlight play, but it was Rudy's effort that made this thing possible in the first place. And of course on the defensive end, which is his true calling card, the Suns tried to challenge him at the rim by going at him or throwing lob passes, and Gobert wanted absolutely no part of anything coming his way. He was either swallowing actions and blowing plays up by himself, forcing the Suns into extremely difficult shots, or made them think twice about even attempting what should have been easy layups. But then, this happened.
Especially to a shot to the ribs like that. That could be a fractured rib.
After review, there is wind-up and significant impact to the ribs of Williams, who is airborne and a vulnerable player with a high potential for injury. That contact is both unnecessary and excessive. This has been upgraded to a flagrant foul penalty 2. Gobert has been ejected from the game.
Gobert was tossed out of the arena in the third quarter of this ball game, and from there the Wolves looked completely lost on both sides, and let's check out some of what I mean. Without Rudy screening to actually create separation, the offense became noticeably stagnant, as the other screeners just couldn't generate mismatches on their own ability to do so. On this play, for example, the defender barely even has to fight over the action, with no sort of progression, and the play eventually goes nowhere. And schematically, it made things much easier for the Suns too, because once they recognized there was no longer a size advantage to exploit, they just started switching everything, and the Wolves just couldn't punish it. This play, for example, after the first screen creates no advantage, the Suns simply fight over, but as the Wolves flow into a second action, now this is where Phoenix decides to just switch this new ball screen, and it results in another stop. So there you have it on the offensive end, but if we're really being honest, the Wolves let this game slip away because of their defense in the fourth quarter. Once Rudy hit the showers, the Suns basically invited themselves in the paint like it was a Four Seasons free food buffet, and all that fear and resistance they dealt with earlier was completely gone, because in the fourth, Phoenix was getting whatever they wanted at the rim. According to tracking data through the first 3 quarters, the Suns shot 57% in the paint, which is pretty normal. But in the fourth quarter, when Gobert was fully out from this matchup, that number jumped up to a crazy 75%, with 8 of their 19 shots coming right at the basket. There was simply nothing the Timberwolves could figure out. Because why? Because their entire winning formula is built around the strength of Gobert's game. He's essentially their garbage man, the guy who fills every hole and cleans up every mistake. And you know what happens when you don't have a garbage man? Eventually the streets start to look like that scene in Batman Begins, or I guess any still image of Gotham you can find.
I'm Batman.
So if you're gonna take anything away from this video, it should be 2 main things. Number 1, maybe start recycling, because pollution is a real life problem. But number 2 is if anyone wants to argue that Rudy Gobert is some tall, clumsy French dude who may or may not know how to play basketball, you are 100% correct. But that doesn't mean he's not insanely impactful, because the Suns definitely know it and the Wolves learned the hard way.